You're listening to Boomers Today with your host, Frank Sampson.
Well, welcome to Boomers Today. I'm Frank Sampson, and of course, each week we bring you important and useful information on facing baby boomers, their parents, and other loved ones. And I just want to again thank everybody for all their support. Our listeners grow each and every day, and that's because of you. You're sharing with family and friends, sharing some of the interviews we do with some just wonderful people and caring people, and very educational. So I just want to thank you. For those of you that don't know, you could certainly listen to our podcasts. We have our own app, Boomers Today app, as well as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and Spreaker, Stitcher, a lot of the other stations you could get, or you could go directly to our website, of course, at boomerstodayradio.com. And so again, just thank you so much. And we have another wonderful guest today. I'm very excited about this. We have with us Tim Sutton. Tim is a 31-year veteran police officer who has worked with hundreds of families dealing with cognitive issues. He has traveled the country for 12 years, educating audiences on understanding the behaviors related to dementia, with his goal to promote peaceful interactions for positive outcomes. Tim, thank you so much for joining us on Boomers Today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you letting me come along for the ride.
This is wonderful. I'd love to just, maybe you could give us a little bit of history. I know you're a police officer, but something must have happened or in the course of your work to have you do such, really helping to educate people. What was the catalyst to get you going with this?
In 2002, the sheriff that I was working for at the time came to me and told me I was going to be running a program for the agency. And I'm just outside of Richmond, Virginia. And I asked him what the program entailed. He said it was to help you find missing people. Well, it happened to be a whole lot more than that. It was a tracking system that is utilized to help individuals or help families, caregivers deal with a loved one who wanders off or elopes and gets away from them. So many times with different forms of dementia, people will wander off, trying to go, you hear a lot of, I want to go home. They say, I want to go home a lot. And a lot of them are out, they'll start walking. And home to them may be 30 years ago where they lived. They think they live there now, and they're trying to get there. So myself, as well as 15 other officers in the agency, we got trained up on this tracking system, where I started initially going out and meeting families who were having that issue, sitting down with them, talking to them, and we would actually put a small watch-sized transmitter on their loved one, who was our client. They're not our patient; they are our clients, who had a propensity to wander. But we would put it on their wrist or their ankle, and they would wear it 24/7. It works off a radio frequency, so it's not like we're tracking somebody 24/7. We are pretty much getting about a mile or so off of that transmitter. So when that caregiver turns around and their loved one is missing, they call 911, and we can actually come out, conduct a search with equipment, and bring their loved one home safe. But when I went out and met the families, I began to see that there was a lot more to the Alzheimer's and dementia and other cognitive issues. There's a lot more to it than just a wandering issue. They were dealing with things on a daily, if not hourly basis that were very stressful and very difficult to deal with. And they needed people to understand. They needed they need people to have a better understanding of what they are dealing with. It's not just that they may wander off. It may be the fact that they don't recognize their spouse, and they're calling 911 saying, oh, somebody broke into my house. They're in here telling me what to do. And that solicits a 911 call. Officers show up. So realizing these families desperately needed people to understand. I realized, law enforcement officers, we're the ones with the tools on our belts that hurt people and take lives. It was imperative to train officers to understand these dementias so that when we got there, we didn't just go there and deal with the situation thinking, oh, this person's got a mental problem. We understood what was going on. And we were able to get out there and not respond over and over and over, but to get out there and handle the call effectively. And the best way to do that would be giving out knowledge, making these officers knowledgeable about different forms of dementia and other cognitive issues.
I think it's fantastic what you're doing. I love, not that we have to conduct a training session here, but I would love to understand, because I know that, as you know, I've been in the industry for quite a while, and I have worked quite often with people with memory issues, or various forms of dementia like Alzheimer's. And I'd have to say, if I sit down with somebody and just start having a conversation, after a little while, I'm going to go, I think this person is definitely having some cognitive. I'm not a doctor,
Right.
But I have a pretty good feel for it. But I can't imagine in an emergency situation,
right,
if a quick decision had to be made about something, how you would know. So help me understand how you even provide that type of training.
Well, my first thing to tell officers, and this is my living rule, is at the end of the day, I'm going home. I am going home. If something happens and I feel as though my life is in danger or somebody else's life is in danger, I have got to do my job. And afterwards, we'll sort through it. But what I try to do is get officers or get people, anybody in my audience, to understand some of the behaviors you may see with these dementias. And hopefully during an interaction or encounter, you may be able to pick up on something that I've told you about. And that light bulb may go off and you think, you know what, this might not be somebody who's trying to hurt me or, argue with me or really presents a danger. Maybe this is that dementia, that Alzheimer's that, Tim was telling us about. And maybe they can govern their response and their actions better. An example I have had is a lot of people don't understand the correlation between law enforcement and Alzheimer's. And I was actually in San Diego speaking, and I had some police chiefs come up and said, I don't understand what the two have to do with each other. And I said, well, let me give you an example. And this is factual. We had a gentleman in my county who fought in World War II. He was in the Navy. And he was in his 80s, but once a month he'd put his Navy uniform on and go walking down one of these country roads. And we would get a call late at night about this elderly male walking down the road in an old Navy uniform. And my officers or anybody asked him where he was going. He was headed to Norfolk. He was headed to Norfolk to get on the ship.
Right.
Because in his mind, it was the early 1940s. We were at war with Germany and Japan. Now, here's the issue. Under my command, working evenings, I had one officer who was of Asian descent, and I had another officer, female officer, who had a very thick Russian accent.
Oh.
Now, I'm rarely inside the box. I spend most of my life outside the box thinking what could happen. Now, in my mind, I wondered what would happen if one of those officers pulled up in a uniform, walked up to him, confronted him, and asked him where he was going. In his mind, who may he think they are? Potentially they're the enemy. And next thing you know, he's on top of them trying to kill them because they are the enemy. We are at war with them. And let's imagine that officer had to use force and possibly deadly force. Now, you being a chief or a sheriff, have the media knocking on your door the next day saying, do you train all of your officers to hurt helpless old men with Alzheimer's? That's a tough thing to have to answer when they come knocking on that door. So when I would hear that call come out, I had a couple deputies who were actually in the Navy. I would tell the Asian officer and the other one with the accent, do not go down there, stay away. And I would send one of my officers who had been in the Navy. So when they walked up, they'd say, Seaman, where are you headed? Sir, I'm headed to Norfolk. Well, you need to get in my car. Come on. And they would go to a restaurant and sit in the restaurant until we could track down his son.
I just got chills.
So
when you just told that story, I really did. It's like, wow, that's fantastic.
It's understanding where they are in their mind when we show up.
Of course, yeah.
And like I said, I think it's imperative, and I think it's an injustice not to train your officers, all public safety officers, to understand it. According to Alzheimer's Association, 5.8 million are dealing with this now, and it's gonna grow exponentially. So it's there. It's not going away. So why not understand what you're dealing with?
I think people, most people don't understand. They just think it's a memory, it's a memory thing.
Right.
It's the way the brain functions. Obviously, it just keeps moving back in time. Like you said, this particular person thought they were in the Navy. They thought that this Asian person was the enemy. It's crazy how the brain works, but that's how it works. Yeah. So, so there. Did you have any additional incentive to do this because maybe you've dealt with somebody in your own family, or is it all kind of experienced through work that you saw?
It's mostly experienced through work. I do now have a family member dealing with Parkinson's and dementia related to the Parkinson's. And it gave me a better understanding, having gained some knowledge and trying to educate myself and interact with the families. It gave me a lot of knowledge and understanding that, when he was forgetting this or he was forgetting that, forgetting names, it's not something he was doing intentionally, to make me mad. And I think that's one of the worst things is caregivers sometimes don't understand what's going on in that person's mind. And they feel like that person is just asking them the same question every 2 minutes to irritate them. And caregiver's job it's a tough job.
Oh, really tough.
And I've heard a lot of people say being a caregiver is worse than dealing with the dementia because you're losing that person. You're watching that person fade away, and it's so hurtful. But no, as I met the families and just realized what they were dealing with, I developed, and everybody always tells you have a passion for helping these families and helping educate, and that's what it is. And I may be in their shoes one day. We need to understand, and for some reason, it struck me. And luckily, I've got officers that work for me who are just as passionate, and I train them up and I train them. I'm not going to be here forever. One day I will retire, but I want people that are working under me now trained up to know everything, if not more than what I know about it, because I don't know it all. But when I do retire, I want the families and the caregivers still taken care of.
Right. Well, that's fantastic. What you do, and I really commend you. Hey, we're going to take just a real quick break, all right? Just to give recognition to our sponsor here. You don't have to go anywhere. Just to take a 30-second break here, and then we're going to come back and continue to talk about your how you're educating people and the audiences that you're reaching. And so we'll be right back. So I just want to remind everybody that today's show is sponsored by Senior Care Authority, an elder care consulting organization that has a national network of professionally trained and experienced local advisors to assist families in determining the right path for your loved ones. They'll discuss various long-term care options, whether it's in-home care, assisted living, memory care, or if you just need an advocate to get advice from, a local Senior Care Authority advisor can help you now. So for a free 30-minute consultation with an advisor in your area, you could contact Senior Care Authority at 888-809-1231, or you could go directly to the website at www.seniorcareauthority.com and find a local advisor in your area. We're back with Tim Sutton. Tim is a 31-year veteran police officer who works with families and helps educate public safety on areas like dementia, especially dementia, like various forms of dementia like Alzheimer's. So, Tim, it's a massive undertaking. What you're doing. I mean, where do you start? I mean, what? I mean, you started obviously. You've been doing it, but how are you reaching out? There's so many people to educate. How do you do it?
Well, fortunately, people like you, Frank, who bring me on to share the information, and podcasts and doing webinars. I've had some big companies actually come in and actually train some of their employees. Financial institutions, because the scams are absolutely ridiculous. But to be able to pick up on some things when grandma is going to the bank every day withdrawing money over and over and over, there may be some type of fraud going on. But for those bank employees or tellers to be able to pick up on something maybe that's just not quite right, they keep coming in, they don't remember being here yesterday, but to be able to grab one of their supervisors and say, hey, I'm not sure, but maybe there's some type of fraud or something going on. And maybe there's somebody else on that account they can contact, another family member, just to, if there is fraud going on, nip it in the bud right there. But just it's raising that awareness. But as far as where to start, I think it's more important just start.
Right.
Even if it's just talking at a local church, educating people. I've been in churches. There are a lot of churches that are starting Caregiver Ministries because they realize that that person who's a caregiver is not coming to church, prior to COVID, but not coming to church because they have to stay home and take care of their loved one. So who's helping them? Who's stepping out and help them? I want everybody, not just law enforcement, not just all public safety. I want everybody to have a better understanding. If you know somebody that's dealing with a family member who has dementia, Alzheimer's, dementia, my thing, once that diagnosis is out, and many times the caregivers share it, that friend network disappears. And, it's not contagious. That's the time when the friend network needs to step in, and they need to start calling them and checking on them and making sure everything's okay. But yeah, you've got churches, civic groups. I've spoken to so many civic organizations, and the interesting thing is when I'm speaking to them, you realize so many of them in there are dealing with exactly what I'm talking about, but nobody in there knows because they don't talk about it. So trying to educate them and let them know it's okay, share with people what's going on. And I would ask people that if you know somebody, just step up, call, hey, can I come over? Can I stay? Can I give you a break? Let you run to the store, do the things that you need to do, because caregivers, they've still got to live their life. They've got to take showers. They've got to go to the bathroom. And that's many times when that wandering happens. They're living life doing things they've got to do, and that person slips out and gets away from them, and you end up with the search and rescue mission. That's why I think the tracking systems are so huge. But what I don't want is a caregiver to be hesitant to call us when they need help, when that person wanders off. I don't want them going out for 2 or 3 hours looking on their own because they're afraid to call 911 and get the law enforcement officers there. Because the general perception of what law enforcement does is we show up and we usually leave with somebody. So do they really want somebody coming in telling them they're a terrible caregiver because they let them wander off? And then they notify Adult Protective Services, who comes in and says, oh, you're a terrible caregiver because you're not watching your loved one. When in fact, it's not the case. These things happen. And I love the fact that, my agency, we train all of our officers on dealing with dementia and Alzheimer's. But I always think about how comforting it must be to have somebody come in your house with a gun and a badge who locks up bad guys and writes tickets, but they can sit there and speak intelligently about what you're dealing with daily. And maybe even educate you, because sometimes doctors aren't telling the caregivers what to expect. Right. The repetition of the questions. Why does mom think she's 6 years old? I don't understand. She's talking like a 6-year-old. And I've had that where a lady lost every bit of her memory and thought she was 6 years old. And she would actually play hide and seek from the caregiver and run over and hide behind the curtains. But that's where she is, and how frustrating that is. So trying to break that wall down and realize we're not the bad guys. I know the media likes to display us many times as the bad guys. Right. But there are good officers out there trying to do some amazing things to help our communities. Yeah,
but education's key. You mentioned church groups. You mentioned other, people in the police force. I mean, what other types of groups? I'm sure you're happy to educate any type of group, but give us some examples of other types of groups that you've worked with and are willing to work with.
I'm willing to work with anybody, and I've done classes for 2 people. Okay. My thought is if one person's sitting across from me and I'm able to educate them some, that's one person that needed to hear it. I've actually had some opportunities to train healthcare facilities, assisted living facilities. I'm a police officer. I don't go in and try to teach the medical aspect of it. I'm not a doctor. My focus is understanding the behaviors and why they think I'm, their brother-in-law. Maybe I resemble their brother-in-law, and in their mind they're 20 years ago. But understanding that their reality might not be your reality. And I don't tell people to lie to somebody with Alzheimer's dementia. However, you've got to find out where they are in their mind, because to them, that's real. That's their reality. And sometimes you have to go there. I've been to many places and spoken. Lady thought I was a police officer, but for another agency where she grew up. I wasn't going to tell her any different. I just went along with that because that's where she was in her mind. But it's to have that peaceful encounter and understand what you can do to help make the situation better. But yeah, I've been in assisted living facilities, training some of the CNAs and some of the staff as to what to understand about the behaviors. And they shoot a lot of examples. Well, I had this person and I couldn't get along with them. And you may remind them of somebody years ago they did not like at all. And I tell officers, think about an issue when you respond and you've got an elderly female and you're in uniform and you're trying to interact and you're not getting anywhere and it's very hostile. There is always possibility that in her earlier years, she may have had a very unfortunate encounter with a police officer. And in her mind, that's who you are. And with the age group coming in, the boomers coming into that age, you've got to look back to the 60s. What was the perception in the black and brown community of police officers back then? And you walk through the door, if they're there in their mind, that may be there. I've had many people just, you go in the house and they go sit in the corner because they don't want to upset the police officer. I had a lady who grew up during World War II, was in Germany. And she was just after the family. She was very hostile. But every time she called, the daughter called 911 and the officer showed up, that woman would go sit in the corner, put her hands in her lap and just sit there and not say anything. And she would speak to you in German. And I have no doubt in my mind when we walked through that door, she figured we were the Nazis or whoever coming in, and she just behaved. So yeah, you need to understand where they are. So I don't think there's any one particular group that has to have the training. I think everybody everywhere needs the training. But like I told you at the beginning, law enforcement, we're the ones with the tools that hurt people and take lives. And that's why I think it's so imperative that we understand what's going on.
So I want to make sure everybody knows if they do want to get a hold of you, how would they do that? What's the best way?
They can check my website. It is a-betterunderstanding.com. I'm on Facebook. Twitter is Tim Sutton 14. My website, you can check on there. I've written some blogs on there, and all of my contact is there. I've got an email. It's aawareness12@yahoo.com. But I would, even if it's just to talk, to carry on phone conversations. Hey, I'm dealing with this. What have you got any ideas what I can do to help? Maybe I can help, maybe I can't, but I'm always willing to talk to you and help you deal with that situation. So I would invite anybody to contact me because, like I said, I love being able to share the information and educate people.
Great. So any tips that you can give to people who are not accustomed to dealing with anybody with dementia? I sometimes see people who, when they see somebody that has dementia, they know they have dementia.
Right.
They seem to just avoid them, just avoid them. Whether it be in church or whatever. Right. I don't know how to deal with the situation, so I better just avoid the situation, and that's not necessarily the right thing to do.
Well, this is the time.
What thoughts do you have there?
In general, having a diagnosis dealing with dementia is the time where the community, the family, the friends, family, they need to come together because that caregiver or caregivers need support. And I look at the holidays now. Holidays are a very difficult time to begin with for a lot of the elderly because people aren't coming to visit them. It's not like it used to be. But now with COVID, it's gotten even worse where, you really have people trying to stay away. So they're so secluded and isolated and they're put over in a corner and they're not having a lot of contact with other people. I would encourage everyone just to reach out. If you know somebody's dealing with it, even if it's just talk 5 minutes on the phone and say, how are you doing? I wanted to check on you. Because like I said before, many times your caregivers are suffering terrible. They don't share it because many times that generation, it's the mindset of this is my problem, this is our problem, we're going to handle it. Well, we need the community to come in. But with Christmas coming up and COVID, you know, something that I told you being outside of the box, I thought about was that lady who thought she was 6 years old. Christmas is coming up. If in her mind she's 6 years old, she's talking about Santa Claus coming. And think about how excited a 6-year-old gets at Christmas, wanting to play with things on the tree, take things off the tree. And when you've got your mom acting like a 6-year-old at Christmas and going around doing things, it's got to be hurtful. It's got to be painful to realize that that's where they are in their mind. That's my mom. Right. I had one girl who called me one time, and I met her and her mom was doing really well, but she had Alzheimer's. And about 6 months later, she called me and she said, Tim, my mom keeps calling me sissy. And I said, well, Amy, she's probably lost that much memory where she thinks you're her sister. 8 months went by and she called me back and said, my mom keeps calling me mom. And I said, well, unfortunately, she's probably at the point where she actually thinks you are her mom. Think about how hurtful, you know, nothing's done intentionally, but think about how much that would hurt. And that's what I'm saying. Get out there and meet people, or find out if you know somebody dealing with it. Reach out. Just let them know you care. You don't have to take extreme measures, but let them know you're there and you care about them and you're thinking about them.
And if I could just add, this is just, I think, so important. I know you'll agree with me here. You can't convince them that they're wrong. Like, no. I'm not your mom, or dad died 20 years ago, or whatever the case may be. You're not going to convince them, because in their mind, they're 100% sure of what they're saying. So you need to go along with it.
Right.
Just go along with it.
Don't argue with somebody with dementia.
No, don't. I mean, I've had adult children say, well, I never lied to my mother. I don't want to lie. Well, no, it's time, you know, you're going to hurt her more. She's going to go through a grieving process if you say dad's dead. He's not here. I mean, they're going to go through another grieving process. Why would you want to?
Well, that Amy girl I was telling you about, originally when I met her, that's the first thing that prompted her. She said, you know, Mom keeps asking me, when's Dad coming home? And I told her, Mom, remember Dad died 2 years ago. Well, 20 minutes later, hey, Amy, when's Dad coming home? Right. Well, Mom, remember, I said, every time you tell her that, it's the first time she's heard it.
That's right.
Do you want her to go through that? Or could you say, well, you know, have we got any pictures? Hey, let's take some pictures and look through the picture book, and oh, there's Dad, and, you know, divert that attention. But, you know, you need to understand it so that you're not unintentionally, you know, causing them more pain, causing them more grief. You're trying to soothe the situation, smooth the situation, and try to make it easier.
I knew this would happen, Tim. I could talk to you all day about this, but unfortunately, we're out of time. We got to have you back again, though.
Oh, yes, indeed.
And maybe just before we sign off here, just let everybody know your website again so they know how to get
it. The website, it's the letter A, -betterunderstanding.com. And email address is aawareness12@yahoo.com. All of my other contact information is on that website, and I would love to talk to anybody and everybody who's interested in hearing more about it.
Tim Sutton, thank you so much for everything you do, and thank you for joining us on Boomers Today. I really appreciate it. And I want to thank everybody for joining us today on Boomers Today. Please be safe, and we'll talk to everybody real soon. Thank you.
You've been listening to Boomers Today with Frank Sampson. To learn more about today's show, visit boomerstodayradio.com and join us next time for another edition of Boomers Today.